blasting, billowing, bursting forth with the power of 10 billion butterfly sneezes.
I'm Tom Bain, and this is Wine, Money, and Song. If you're interested in wines and wanting to find out the best values, please subscribe. So over 4 decades plus, all these wines here, I've been accumulating them, and a lot of these cases here have followed me around the United States. And when you start to collect wine, there are people who like wine, who like to drink wine, and they like to buy a little wine. But if you're going to collect wine, you got to be very serious and passionate about it. And as I learned about wine and gained experience with wine and traveled to Europe and visited many vineyards, I got bit by the bug of collecting wine. And there was one part of my life when maybe 30 to 40% of my income was going to investing in wine. But the stories that these wines could tell, especially the Bordeaux, all these wooden cases, they've traveled with me from the Bronx, New York, where I bought my 82 Bordeaux in 1984, stored them there for about 5 years. Then I packed them up and I moved them to, I bought a home with my brother out on Long Island, and I had a separate room. They came with me, and then I started buying more wines. And just to follow around, you see all these wines here, and they're sort of like children of mine. And the average person moves about 3.8 years, something like that. So these wines have been in the Bronx, have been in Lindenhurst, Long Island, and they've been in Portchester, in Westchester, New York, and then I moved out to California in Camarillo, and then I moved back to the Boston area. So if they could tell stories, they'd have a lot of stories to tell. So down here, we have more Bordeaux, and packing these cases and moving them around the country, they're all going to have a different story. But I'm just showing you how I've accumulated these wines and how I have accumulated certain wines, like you see here, Dominus. There's like 30 cases of Dominus here, and maybe 400 or 500 cases of classified Bordeaux. But these are part of my soul, the passion I have for life, and having them near me was very important. I never went for professional storage for a prolonged period of time. I had to be near my wines or be in close proximity of my wines. So I'm going to lay out the stories to you, how I moved all these wines and all of their great adventures that they've had. So we're going to travel back away from my storage facility, and we're going to talk about it. So there's many stories about me moving my wine collection from coast to coast. It all started back in 1982 Bordeaux vintage. Back in 1983, my mentor, Ron Metzger, and I traveled to Bordeaux in 1983, and we tasted the wines out of the barrel, and it was a great vintage, and it was the first really modern Bordeaux vintage, meaning a lot of technology changed, and the wines from that point on were made in a very ripe, fruity style, and the technology of winemaking really jumped 2 or 3-fold. And the 82 vintage was the beginning of that. So when I got home from Bordeaux, I said I have to buy these wines. So I had a car. I had two cars, so I sold one of them, and I bought 82 Bordeaux with it. And I bought about 31 cases of Bordeaux. Now, remember, back then the wines were a fraction of the price. I bought 3 cases of Lafite, 2 cases of Margaux, 2 cases of Aubryon, 1 case of Latour, and 1 case of Mouton. And the only reason why I bought 1 case of Mouton and Latour, they were hard to get, or else I would have bought more. But understand, those wines are only like $35, $40 a bottle. And now they're close to $8, $9, $1,000 a bottle. So that was then, this is now. So I kept the bottles there until 1987, when I bought a house with my brother out on Long Island. And I moved the cases out there. I had a spare bedroom. I insulated it, and I had an air conditioner during the day, and at night I humidified it, so I didn't want to dry it out. I didn't have refrigeration there at that time. And when you put air conditioning in, you dry the air out. So I had to moisten it too, so it was a yin and yang. So until I moved out of Lindenhurst, now I lived where the water table was only a foot or two down, so I couldn't dig any further. We had a crawl space, and thank goodness I had the spare room. So when I moved the cases to Portchester from Lindenhurst, and I was getting married, and I remember the day we moved them. It was buckets of rain, and it was flooding all over the place. And I had about 6 friends who loaded up a big truck, a 24-foot truck. We went over to Bronx Whitestone Bridge. We went up to Westchester, and we broke only 1 bottle, and it was a cheap bottle, 78 Maine. And we moved it in there, and we had a great barbecue. We had such a party, and I had the wine in a nice deep cellar there, and it was a great feeling seeing all my wine there and having it at my fingertips, that every night when I had dinner, I'd go downstairs and see all my wine there. You know, you have pride of ownership, and plus, I think I'll go down and I'll have this tonight, which was very, very nice. And that was in 1994. We moved into Westchester. We had 2 kids, and in 2004, my wife got an offer from a biotech company out in California, which she couldn't refuse. So I said to my wife, yeah, that's all great, but what are we going to do about the wine? At that time, we had like 300 cases of wine, at least 250. Let's say 250. I go, what are we going to do about the wine? It's going to be expensive. So she broached that to the company, and they said, that's part of the relo. We'll pay for your shipping of your wine. And I said, are they sure? And they said, yeah, no problem. They've done it before. So Western Carriers is a company that does moving of wine cellars. So they came in October, and they collected my wines, and they stored them in temperature controlled for about 6 months. And we moved to California. We were in temporary housing. And the housing market was very, very tight back then. So it took us months before we could find a house in California. So we finally found one. I had to, because there's no basements in California because of the earthquakes. I had a 3-bay garage, and I took 2 of the bays out, and I super insulated it, and I refrigerated it. I had a Whisper Cool cooling unit, and I had a handyman come and built me my wine cellar. And he basically insulated it to about R30, the walls, and the ceiling R45. The higher the R value, the better. And plus we had the refrigeration unit, and we had an insulated door. And in California, because of the earthquakes, we had to secure the shelves that held the wine. We had to attach it to the walls in the garage. There was no freestanding shelves there. They had to be secure into the wall. And he spent a good month and a half. And I remember we were going to have the wine shipped to us in a few days. And I was worried we weren't going to get the wine cellar finished in time. But he worked weekends. And he was able to finish them. And it came on a Monday morning, the shipment. And Western Carriers bought it from New Jersey, where they were stored cross-country. And they rolled them in, and my handyman wanted to be there to see it. And he was just amazed by all the wines rolling in. And I said to him, "You should be proud." I says, "You have, you've really made a good home for these wines, and I want to thank you." So they sat there, and in California, we had wildfires where we were evacuated, and I'm sitting there with all our papers, and my wife Gloria said to me, "Is there anything else you want to take?" I go, "Yeah, like 400 cases of wine." I said, "We can't evacuate. I can't take the 400 cases of wine." So we sweated that out, and I pretty much made my decision. We weren't going to stay there anymore. I didn't want to sacrifice my wines. And another event that happened in California, I remember we were going through a blast of heat, and it was like 105 degrees, 103 degrees, and all of a sudden, my cooling unit, my refrigeration unit froze up, and it wasn't working. And I called the company who sells the breeze airs, and they said it's going to take 5 days to get you another unit. And what was I going to do? It was 103 degrees. And I sat there for about an hour. If a grown man could cry, I would have cried. But I had to act. So I got my circular saw, and I made a hole in the wall. I put an air conditioning unit in, and the wines didn't get above 64 degrees. Although it was dry, it was 3 or 4 days, and we kept the temperature reasonable. And the new unit came in, and we popped it in, and it went back down to 57 degrees. So we saved the wines. And then again, I said, I can't have this. I can't sweat this stuff out. It's just too important to me. So when we decided to move in the Boston area. And this time on the way back across country, her company wasn't paying to have the wine shipped back. I had to pay out of my own pocket. So what I did is I hired a middleman to come pick the wines up and store it right nearby in their temperature control facilities. And they held it until I had my new house in the Boston area. And I had my facility where I was going to put the wine, and they transferred it there. And everything went super smooth, and I was sweating it out. And I thought it was going to take like a half a day to move the wines in. It only took like 2.5, 3 hours. And I was very happy when I locked the door, and all the cases were safe, put to sleep, and in a very good environment. But as I said, all these cases have some story to tell. And we avoided catastrophe a number of times. But if you're serious about wine and passionate about wine, you have to have them near you. You have to have the ability to go and pick out a few bottles instead of having to call up on a phone and visit your wines. My wines have always either been right where I was or right nearby where I could access them. And all those wines have been a part of my life for a long period of time. And they are kind of like children to me. So that's the story of my traveling wine cellar.